All right, we're gonna get started. We're a couple minutes past the hour.
Can Becca see the slides?
Can you see the slides, Becca?
Nope, I can't. I can hear you though.
Okay. And now you still can't?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes they have to reboot the system if they cannot see it though.
Oh, it's just not shared. The screen's just not shared. That would help.
Now I got it.
Got it?
The presenter or the presentation view?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. All right.
So, do you want to do the speaker to the ceiling and use this microphone instead of your computer? That's one will record better.
Sure. I think it's for the recording. You'll be woken up by me screaming in your ear in just a second, don't worry.
Are you gonna use the freestanding one, or are you gonna put that one like on your head?
Okay, if you
I like the one use the clip.
to
Oh, yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah, that
I
was
just
fun.
want to think about it.
Isn't it like important?
Yeah. Oh, was it?
I don't remember. I thought it was, wasn't it? I was just down there and thought that it was
Yeah.
corded.
Like
So
quarter
good.
to here.
I
have a
little
little
hat.
Maybe I'm imagining it. It was like my first few months at working
No, I think
here.
that's right. I think
Yeah.
you're right. Yeah.
how do we go back to Zoom here? Where is Zoom setting? Is that this one here?
What are you trying to do?
Try to use the microphone and speaker. Oh, there we are. Okay, so click on that one. And then let's choose echo setting for mic.
Same. Long hair is so much easier to deal with. I actually have to do my hair if I wanted to like look presentable.
Yeah, that was actually the most helpful
There's less of it
one
to
that I've
do.
been doing a good job of.
Does it take
The
so long?
federal updates.
I do, it's just being able to like pull it up.
Yeah. What was helpful about it? Just there's a lot going on, or?
Well, they talked about what it means to have a container.
Oh, okay.
And then they talked about the forward funding, and they put that, they lowered my fear level because he talked about how the administration wants to do it, but Congress isn't allowing them to do it at any higher
like-
rate than last year.
Brett.
Basically.
Right, yeah, the federal guy, yeah, yeah, so they talked, yeah, oh, it's interesting.
Oh, maybe it was just.
All right, can you guys hear okay and see okay still?
10 years.
Oh.
We hear you.
Because I had done it like.
Rebecca and Renee, can y'all hear okay and see the screens?
Yep, it's all good.
Awesome, thank you. All right. So we are talking about reconciling reports in Concur today. This is a very aspirational presentation deck, as I'm praying for snow that we will probably never have again, but we're hoping for it. So we have talked about travel and Concur and stuff a lot in the past year, but it's complicated and there's always a lot of questions. So we thought we would sort of talk about it again today, but really specifically talking about the Concur piece and reconciling travel and P cards. So we'll just go through some general travel reconciliation reminders, talk about personal travel, and then reconciling. Oh. And then, so reconciling employee, non-employee travel, P card purchases, and then we'll do an activity and then go through some tips and tricks and resources. Right, so first, I pulled this from a previous training and just wanted to remind people of the lens that as approvers, we are always looking at your reports through. So we're always making sure that your expenses meet these tests of propriety. We have to be able to say yes to all 8 of these questions on the left-hand side in order to be able to approve a purchase with sponsored project or university funds. And then we're also considering these federal cost principles, so the cost must be allowable, reasonable, allocable, so like allocated to a specific project, and then consistently treated as similar types of costs. So it has to pass this reasonable and necessary test, and so we will look back to see, have we approved a similar purchase in the past? What's the purpose? So if we do come back and ask you questions about an expense, don't take it personally. It's not about you. We're just trying to make sure that we can demonstrate that we're thinking about these tests of propriety and adhering to these principles when we're approving things. And something that we hear a lot when we're in trainings is this newspaper test or maybe the social media test. So thinking about if this purchase were splashed on all of CU's social media pages, how would the public react to us spending money in this way? And that's kind of a way to also think about is a purchase appropriate and allowable? So again, this is just kind of the lens that we are looking at all your reports with, just so you have a little context into how we make those decisions. Okay, so just some general reminders here. We have attended as the fiscal team some recent trainings through the Procurement Service Center on travel. So a lot of this is coming directly from those trainings, and those trainings are a result of an internal audit at the university. And so there were some areas for improvement identified, and we are trying to be respectful collaborators with our other campus partners. They are asking for more consistency in how we review and approve and track these things, and so that's kind of why we're bringing this back up again. So for travel booking, always book your flights and rental cars directly through Concur. Hotels are optional through Concur, but you can book them there as well. For driving, we can only reimburse up to the amount of the flight for gas reimbursement. So that's why that flight comparison is required when you get the travel approval, and then also with your report in Concur. And then for driving, if you do have any mileage, use that mileage feature within Concur that has you add the start and the end address, and it calculates the mileage for you there. If there are any changes to your travel plans, if you need to leave a day earlier or return home a day later or something like that, we do ask that you respond to the form stack email approval that came from CAIANH Fiscal. So you submit the form stack, Aaron or someone at CAIANH Fiscal will say this is approved. If you need to change anything, just reply to that email thread and keep everything in one spot so we can have everything in one document together, and then you'll upload that whole conversation with your report so we can see sort of how the process evolved, if anything did change from the original submission. And then if there are other changes to plans or emergencies, really this comes down to the why, like who's responsible, why did the change happen. This is going to always be a conversation. It's a pretty gray area as to who's responsible if there is an additional charge. So just talk to the fiscal team if something does happen with you or a non-employee, and we can help you work through who's responsible for paying if there is an additional cost to change things. Okay, so any questions on the booking side so far? Okay. So while you're in travel status, just remember any extras aren't reimbursable. So like trip insurance, Wi-Fi on the plane, meals on the plane, things like that are not reimbursable expenses. And then for taxi or ride shares, it's only reimbursable to get to the hotel or to your airport or to approved official functions. So if you're attending a dinner with some friends in that city, that's a personal dinner, a Lyft or Uber ride or taxi would not be reimbursable to and from that. We are only approved or allowed to reimburse up to a 20% tip. You can certainly tip more than that if you want, but just know that you'll only be reimbursed up to that 20%. And then keep your receipts with your pickup and drop-off locations, please. I know Lyft sends an email receipt of the route and everything like that, so that's really helpful to include with your Concur reports. Any questions on the during travel? Yeah.
Yeah, so for during travel, do we still have pay per diem for pay. So if we still have that one, then for the meal on a plane, if we do that, something like pay per diem, are we qualify for that or?
Yeah, so per diem, typically you would pay like out of pocket for that, so you just get a set amount of per diem based on the travel destination. So you wouldn't request the reimbursement for, like, let's say you ate lunch on a plane and that was part of your travel day, you'd be eligible for up to 75% of the per diem amount on your travel day, but you wouldn't request reimbursement for that specific meal on the plane. It would just be part of that per diem you were allowed to receive.
Right, and also that, is it just for the taxi or ride share? Does it allow for car rental?
Meaning like if you have a rental car and then you drive to like a personal dinner. Yeah, I mean, technically I think it'd be the same thing, but it would just be, you don't calculate your mileage with a rental car. It's just the cost of the rental car. So I guess we wouldn't know if you drove separately to a dinner, because the mileage is only if you're driving like a personal car and getting reimbursed. But if you have a rental car, you just submit the receipt for the cost of the rental car during the trip.
And the gas.
And the gas. Good questions.
That's the time when you do need a receipt.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And then I'm gonna star these because these are very important points. So these two kind of report structure that are starred at the top are really important and helpful for us as the fiscal team, and also additional reviewers and approvers outside of the team who are looking at your reports. And these are kind of similar to research standards. So really thinking about, like, anyone should be able to pick up your work or your report or your Concur report and be able to see the story that your travel is telling without having any additional context. So I know a lot of times I do have context into maybe why you're traveling, but you should assume that whoever's looking at your report has no idea why you traveled, and so you really need your documentation to tell that story. So for the naming conventions for your header, should always be like the date of the travel, last name, or the date that you're submitting the report, last name, first initial, and then travel. And then this is what's going to show up when we do our monthly review of expenses on speed type, so that way we'll be able to say, oh great, I saw Jaylee's travel came through for this event, I was expecting to see that, that's what we want to see. So that just helps us too when we're looking at things on the back end. And then we always want to have the business purpose in your business purpose, and then also a header comment and individual expense comments for every report every time. So anytime you enter an expense, we want to just see a little comment about why there was an expense charge. So lift to airport from home, lift to airport from hotel, something really quick like that. Okay, so we're still in the report header when you first create your report here, and there's that question of in-state versus out-of-state travel. This is kind of confusing, it took me a while. In-state means anything that's in Colorado, and out-of-state means it's outside of Colorado. So regardless, I think for non-employees, this is maybe a little confusing if they live in a different state and they're traveling to Colorado. That would be considered in-state travel because they're coming to Colorado for an event or a conference. Okay, for attachments, we want to really, upload only what is really necessary to tell your story. Sometimes as an approver, I see people that are trying really hard to attach everything that they think is totally necessary, and I end up having to get through like 150 pages of attachments, and it's a little confusing to see what's going on. So only attach each item once, or if you prefer to make like one PDF with all your attachments, you just need to upload that PDF once, and it will show when we're reviewing the entire report. And then kind of similar to attachments, we do need to see that it's called the hotel folio, or that itemized receipt from your hotel expenses. And this is just showing us that no like room service was charged, or additional charges or something like that accidentally went to your room. So we just want to see like the actual room charge each night.
And can that be included if you're making one PDF of your receipts? Can the hotel receipt be entered?
Totally,
Okay.
yeah, definitely. Okay, and then agendas, this is kind of on the line with attachments, but really when we are looking at agendas, we are looking to verify eligibility for per diem meals, and then whether like travel is necessary to get to the conference location. So let's say your hotel is 5 miles away from the conference, you needed to take a lift to and from, there wasn't another way to get transportation, so then we would know, oh, okay, it's okay to approve these lift charges back and forth. And then also, you know, if it says breakfast is provided at the conference, then you wouldn't be able to claim per diem for breakfast. So that's what we're looking for with agendas. So just give us the shortest agenda you can that gives us that information we need. Again, we don't need to see every single conference session you attended. Really just keep it as high level as possible so we can see the location and then if meals were provided. Any questions on agendas?
I would just add, the other thing that we're looking for on the agendas is like the timing of the conference so that we can ensure that your travel dates were matched up with, like if there was an evening event on that first day and you had to get there in the morning, something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to personal travel. So this is really just super simple, hopefully. Anything that's not home to event to home is considered adding personal travel. So this is for employees or non-employees. For employees, again, that I mentioned the flight comparison for driving. This is also required if you are adding personal days before or after your trip. And then you would be responsible for paying for the cost difference. And I'm going to show you on the next slide 2 ways that you can do that. And then just some quick reminders. So if you have personal days before your trip, your per diem starts on the day that you would have flown for business, and you get that up to 75% on that travel day. And then similarly, if your personal days are after the business event, then it's 75% per diem on your travel day home. I know this is maybe a little confusing, but just think about it either way. Even if you didn't add personal days, you still have to get home, right? So that travel day is when you get that 75%. And Claudia and others have very helpfully put more details in the travel SOP that is linked here in section 1.2 if you have more questions.
I was gonna say, shout out.
I know Amanda's here, but she's not in here, so. Okay, so this slide, I know this is maybe different, and if anyone encounters this, like, I'm happy to help walk you through it in Concur, but this comes directly from the PSC webinar that I went to recently. And these are just 2 options for employees to deduct personal expenses from an expense report. So the first one here is to click that itemizations tab within the actual expense, and then you itemize the personal expenses out. So you can see here on the right, I don't know why they did it this way, but $400 of the flight is considered a personal expense, and so they're requesting $0 reimbursement for that, but $15.58 of the flight was considered a university cost. So they've itemized out the personal days that were added onto the flight. A second way you can do that, you would not do both of these, you would pick one. A second option would be to use the personal travel allowance enter negative amount, which very helpfully tells you how to enter the dollars. So you can just say the payment type it just pulls up as cash out of pocket, and then you would write negative $400. So the same way to show $400 of this trip was a personal expense that I'm not expecting to be reimbursed for. So again, I know I haven't seen people use this a ton, so if you do have questions when you encounter this, I'm happy to walk you through it. Yes, sir?
That would only work if you have other expenses to take off of, right? Because this would be paid for by the university.
So, yes, yeah. So, I guess you could do.
You missed your shot.
It would have to be a cash receipt if
You missed your
it's
shot.
going to be the reimbursement will be less than
You missed your
what
shot.
you have.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. The second option is helpful. They said in the webinar, like if you have multiple expenses that were personal and you don't want to itemize each one, you could just do the total. So let's say $500 of your trip was personal, you can add multiple things into that. But yeah, to Sarah's point, this only works if you are still owed money from this trip by the university. If you owe money after this, then you would have to use the cash receipt process. Yeah.
Okay. I think I've done this before, but I think, and if it's like if the amount that you owe the university exceeds that, I understand that you have to pay a cash receipt, but do you also have to attach this report like showing that you like have like a negative balance that you need to pay? Like should you also put the personal travel allowance in here, even if it's more than what you're owed, what you owe the university? Does that make sense? No.
Question.
I
don't quite get it.
think I'm confused.
So, like, I am getting reimbursed, say, like $200 for per diem and transportation costs that I paid. But during that time, I took personal travel that made my flight like $400 more expensive. So there's still this $200 mismatch, this $200 that I owe the university. Should I still enter that in and have like a, I guess like a negative balance because I owe the university $200? And then if I'm doing the cash receipt, I attach this expense to that. And so the expense is still approved? Or I have to pay the cash receipt, attach the cash receipt to the,
Yeah.
cash receipt comes
Cash
first.
receipt's attached to the report. You don't need to attach the report to the cash receipt.
Yeah.
Is that
Okay, yes.
So you'd have to like create the report in Concur to see what you owed, to see how it all, worked out, or I guess if you have a separate tracking, but before submitting the report, you would do the cash receipt, get it approved, and then attach that to your
Yes,
report.
okay, I vaguely remember that now.
Yeah.
Yes, that makes
Good
sense.
question. Thanks for re-explaining.
I was confused for a second.
That's good to know too, because the cash receipt process can be a little bit long, so it's like, make sure you do your expense report really fast
Yeah.
after the travel, so you can like get that submitted in a timely fashion.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, the cash receipt process is confusing too, so if you guys have questions, just always reach out to the fiscal team and we can tell you where to take it and how to get it all set up and everything.
McKenna, quick question. Did they say anything in the recent travel trainings? It used to be that you could use Concur to book personal travel. Like if I just want to take a personal trip, you used to be able to use it to book flights and hotel. Did they say anything about that?
No.
Okay, maybe we can
Never
follow
heard
up on
that.
that and see, because obviously this process would be
I
relevant.
book all my flights.
Yeah.
It would be the advantage.
But
Yeah,
then you have access to Christofferson.
right.
You have to pay $20, but it's not like going to a travel agent, and then maybe you get the deals that the university gets.
Totally.
through the United.
Yeah, I've never heard that. That's definitely something to look into. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Non-employee personal travel, very similar to employee personal travel, but just one thing to keep in mind is that even if, so let's say someone is coming for the RC Tech conference and then they have another conference that's not related to RC Tech that they're going straight to after this conference, that would still be considered personal travel because it's not CAIANH related. So even if they're adding on other work travel to their trip, that's still personal and not reimbursable, not eligible to be paid for by the university. So this does need to be approved by CAIANH, and I think I've talked with most people who are responsible for non-employee travel in this room, but we definitely don't recommend widely advertising this as a possibility to people. Certainly we can make it available upon request, but it just adds a lot, as you all know, administrative burden to you all and just kind of opens the floodgates for a lot of changes. So definitely if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to us. But if you do approve it, then we do need to see that flight comparison again, and then you'll submit that when you submit the non-employee reimbursement form. And then remember that if a consultant has a scope of work that includes travel, you would not submit their reimbursement through Concur for that, but they would instead submit an invoice for those travel expenses. So keep that in mind. And then similar to employee, so for reconciliation, they would need the cash to pay via cash receipt if their personal travel was more than what they're going to get reimbursed, and then if not, then they can just mark the personal expenses as personal and deduct that from the reimbursement. So again, you kind of have to create that draft report to see what it's going to cost and then get them to mail you a check for that cash receipt. More information in section 2.2 of the travel SOP. Amanda, you're here now, so I can give you credit for also creating this beautiful SOP. You refer to it frequently, so good job. Okay, I think Sarah is
I have a
up.
question in the chat. Did you see that come
Oh
up?
no. Okay, Rebecca's asking, last year for RC Tech, we had a person miss a flight and had to deduct the difference from their per diem. Since the per diem was more than what they owed, the person was able to get money back out of per diem. Yeah, exactly. So that's a great example. So there was no cash receipt needed in this example because they still were receiving more reimbursement. They just got a smaller reimbursement amount. Okay.
Oh, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is it allowable for non-employees to like choose a more expensive flight? Does that make sense? Like it's like within the travel days, but like there's a cheaper one that like makes more sense. And then, but they're like, I want to do the more expensive one.
No, it's the same rules as for us, so you just need to choose the most affordable that still meets the business purposes. So in that case, it would be the one that
Okay.
is less
So you
expensive.
wouldn't like guide. Okay.
Wait, follow up on that. Can they get the flight they want and pay the difference?
Yeah,
Oh, that's.
but I would, if it were me, like, I would not offer that. Like I would, if they asked, I would say, yeah, we can make that work, but I wouldn't offer
Yeah.
to,
I've
yeah.
never.
So I'm just going to go into a little more detail for both reconciling employee travel and then reconciling non-employee. It's going to be along the same lines of what McKenna was talking about. But so for before your travel, just to help you on the back end with your reconciling, make sure that you're choosing that reasonable flight and hotel. And for the flight, we've talked about that, just what I just said, just making sure that it is meeting the business purposes and is the most affordable. It doesn't always mean it's the cheapest flight on the list. In fact, the university does not want us to book with Frontier or certain airlines, so sometimes it's not going to be exactly the cheapest on the list. And then you want to make sure when you're booking your hotel that you're reviewing what the local per diem rates are for the hotel. We don't actually require to stay underneath that amount because it's like not attainable. However, when we're reviewing the hotel on the back end, if it's far beyond what the per diem rate is for that area, we're going to take a look at that area and see if there were other hotel options that were less expensive, and you might get into trouble where you have to pay that difference if you ended up paying for a more expensive hotel when there are better options in the area. For Colorado hotels, you want to make sure that you're getting those taxes removed. So in some cases, it is helpful. In most cases, it would be helpful to check with the supplier ahead of time that they are able to remove those taxes, and so that you don't get into trouble on the back end. And then before travel is a good time to make sure that your approved email for your travel is matching your actual travel. So make sure that you're sending an email to Erin in response to your approval email that says, actually this changed because I just bought my flights and it's a little bit different, because we do check that your approval email matches your travel when we're doing the approvals. For during your travel, you should be using, if you have a travel card, you should use your travel card for all incidental expenses that are reimbursable. You should not use your travel card for food for exactly the reason we were saying for HIP, that we always prefer to do per diem. So it's just way too complicated for the employee to be making sure that you're staying within per diem with your travel card, and then you'll just get that lump sum per diem and you use your own credit card for that. If you don't have a travel card, you can use your personal credit card throughout your travel and get that reimbursed. So make sure that you're keeping all of your receipts except for food. You don't need to keep receipts for that. And there is a Concur mobile app, so if you want to keep track of your receipts and expenses as you go, that would make your reconciling easier on the back end. Yes.
Question for the taxes for the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
What if someone doesn't have a travel card and then they like use their personal credit card, but then they're reimbursed? I guess like, I know some places are, well, you don't have proof, you don't have the tax exempt ID number or anything like that, so we won't remove it. I guess could we be reimbursed, like if we paid the taxes for that?
Yes. So you have to. I'll talk about that a bit in the next slide, but yeah, you just have to prove that you've tried.
Okay.
So you would have to send an email to the hotel, asking to get those taxes removed, and if they say that's not possible, then you attach that email, that communication, and then you can get those taxes reimbursed. But then you want to know not to use that vendor again next time.
Yeah.
So and then we just don't want to see a pattern with taxes, and we want to know that you've tried. But like Airbnb, we can't get taxes taken off for that, so our guidance is not to use Airbnb in Colorado.
There is I can send this out if people want it to, but CU has a web page that has like all the tax exempt information that you could also send to a hotel to say, I'm a CU employee, here's our tax exempt information if you don't have like the card with that ID printed on the front. So that might be like helpful backup that we can send out.
Sometimes your ID will work too, because it's a state entity, so their position is they don't have to provide a tax exempt. So they said any place in the state of Colorado should honor it with your ID. That's what the university says.
Okay.
So then, for after your travel, just remember to attach the actual approval email, so not the one that you send to Erin, but the one that Erin responds and says this is approved. So make sure that's attached to your Concur report. And ideally, you want to be reconciling within 30 days of your travel. I recommend just doing it the day you get back, because you're not working yet. You're like still kind of easing back in. Just do it immediately so you remember everything. But you need to be making sure that you are reconciling within 90 days, and that because if you do not, then that gets added to your taxable income. So we have seen that actually changing people's paychecks. So you want to make sure that you are reconciling within 90 days. And we get the question, let's say you submit it within that 90 days and then it gets sent back to you. Does that clock restart? It doesn't. You just need to make sure that your initial submission is within 90 days. And then make sure, we just say this over and over again, make sure you're following all the travel guidelines and policies. And like McKenna said, you want to add detail. So if there's something that doesn't look like it's following the policies, explain why you think it's still an allowable expense, because that's what's going to flag and that's going to cause that back and forth. And make sure that you're telling that story so that everybody who's approving can see what's happening, and someone in 5 years can see what happened. So we have some tips for non-employee travel. So for before travel, there's a lot of things you can do to make your reconciling easier for the non-employee travel. So these are some questions you want to figure out the answers to ahead of time. Most importantly, I think, is figuring out how you're going to communicate travel expectations to non-employees. And that can be a meeting, an info session, it can be a one-pager, it can be an email, but just make sure you're setting those expectations, because that really cuts back on how many mistakes and issues and questions we have after travel or during travel. And then you want to pick a way that you're booking non-employee travel that's going to make it so that they're not booking flights that are not compliant. That was a lot of double negatives, but to make sure that they're booking compliant flights. And what we usually recommend in most cases is for them to be booking through CBT and for us to be approving, but the university has different ways that non-employees can book their flights, but just really consciously decide how you're going to do that so that we don't run into any issues when we're reconciling where they booked a flight that's not allowable. And then along the lines, if you do choose to go through CBT, make sure that you're choosing who's going to be that approver through CBT and understand that it is a pretty, it's a big responsibility because it's a lot of money that you are having to approve, and the fiscal team is happy to help out with that role because we understand that it's fiscal and it's a little scary, and it's kind of an on-call role. So it is an on-call role. So when people are traveling, you need to be able to respond quickly to CBT if there are changes in their travel. So understanding that. And then a big one that does come up a lot is how are you going to handle canceled or changed flights and the associated fees. So like McKenna said, this does vary. But it's important to talk with us before communicating with the non-employees what you think the outcome will be, because what we hate is if we promise that a change can be made and that we can pay for it, and then it actually ends up on the non-employee. So we want to make sure that we're kind of making that allowability decision ahead of time and then communicating with our non-employees. This should really be flight cancellations or flight changes should really be an exception, not a rule. We don't want to be making this, habit to have all these changes. And then if in some cases it is allowable to have refundable tickets and to book that way, to have that flexibility. For example, we did that for the RC Tech conference last year because it was at NIH and there was so much federal transition and there were so many things going on that we could suspect that there might be a lot of changes, so that was allowable reason to have refundable tickets. So if you want to go that route with your conference, feel free to talk to the fiscal team and we can talk that through. And then you want to make sure, see if your non-employees can front the money for things like food and hotels, because sometimes you have to put a deposit down when you book into a hotel. And if they cannot, feel free to reach out to us and we can brainstorm other ways to make those payments happen. And as a project team, you want to figure out who's going to be responsible for the post-trip reimbursements and managing that process, because it's really helpful if it's the same person who's communicating about the travel throughout. I understand that sometimes it has to be delegated between different team members, but it's helpful if everybody has the same context throughout the travel. And I think we've already mentioned with the scope of work.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
On the first one that you talked about, has anybody created a one-pager or anything for non-employees that, instead of recreating the wheel, is there a way we could all have access to something?
Yeah, so Amanda, you guys have a PowerPoint, right?
We have PowerPoint. We also have a one pager too that could be edited fairly easily to fit whatever conference.
Isn't it linked in the SOP?
It is linked in the
Yeah,
SOP,
which
but
I can,
hey,
yeah.
send it.
And
to
I
you.
know-
It's also probably
No, it's
updated.
fine, if it's somewhere, that's
And-
great.
Yeah, we can, after this, we'll make sure, that you know where that is. And I know TRC has one, so I think everybody, but that's a good idea to have it really be on the same.
Yeah, but we can even make just a generic one.
Yeah. I have some questions. If now's a good time, I can also ask them later. What does happen if they miss their flights? I assume that might happen at the RC Tech conference.
It's
What
happened.
is, well, it happened with CDTR, but I didn't have to deal with that. If we want to communicate beforehand what happens if they miss their flights, what does happen?
They
Do
have to
they?
pay for the difference because
They have to
it's
pay
a
for the
personal
difference of-
reason. Unless it was because the conference ran late.
What if
But-
they miss it and just don't rebook? Are they on the hook for that flight?
Yeah, I think we would still pay for the flight.
We'd still pay for the flight. Okay.
But isn't there a way that you can get the credit back or something? If there is a credit that can come back to us, can't we use that for another employee or something? If the flight was
that's
never
true.
taken, okay.
Yeah. So theoretically, if we got the credit back, we would need to make sure it comes back to us and not the person.
Yeah.
But if it's not possible,
But if they were credited, then they would have to basically provide us, it would be a cash receipt.
yeah, which just happened, that's like a mistake, like CBT shouldn't do that, yeah.
With the credits,
Yeah.
they're all-
Do you
You can go, Rebecca.
So last year that did happen with the CTR, but the primary reason it ended up being an issue is because no one reached out to me for approval. So I didn't get any information about it until the change was already made and the person was on their flight and on their way. So we were kind of dealing with that all after the fact. But I think because the person had already like checked into their flight and it was so close to the original flight that they then had to get put on a later flight, that they were still on the hook for it. And I don't remember what the difference in the flight was. I don't remember what the amount was to make that change, but whatever it was deducted from their per diem. And thankfully for them, it wasn't so much that they were then owing the university, they just got less per diem than they would have otherwise.
That might be, so it might be helpful, because I do think that happens a lot, because people are flying and like, they're flying and they change their flights, but like, we can't like approve all the change flights at the times that everyone's like applying, and then like sometimes they change them.
I've had to do it before and I just went straight through the airline, but there was no change fee. But yeah.
Yeah, so
And that comes back to the expectation setting ahead of time.
Yeah.
It's like, because a lot, like that situation, when I was reviewing it, it seemed like, using federal funds, that didn't seem like a good use of federal funds. It didn't seem appropriate, but the non-employee travel might not have seen that. So just setting those expectations ahead of time and not like assuming that everybody has the same lens that we might. Yeah.
that's helpful. We will communicate that.
Yeah.
Prior. Is there a deadline for like non-employee reimbursements? Like after 90 days, are they not able to get reimbursed?
We don't have that.
Or it's like
It's not the same implications,
Okay.
but I would follow the same rules. It should still be within 30 days. It's also just, especially if it's money that they paid out of pocket, that's just like a long time for a non-employee to wait to get that money back. And then also just thinking about, like, we never want to have things on grants sitting for more than 3 months because of reports and all the other implications. So it's good to keep it within.
Okay, I was just wondering.
And like, people probably want their money,
Yeah,
right?
we typically set the deadline like a week after, but I didn't know if there was
yeah.
like if we should communicate, like if you don't submit it after 90 days, we won't.
Yeah, they don't
reimburse
have the same amount of the same consequence.
Kind of going off of that, what if somebody just they're not gonna submit their reimbursements for the non-employees?
Then they don't get the money.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you can set a deadline, and if they don't make the deadline, you can say, sorry.
Yeah.
And we can help with that communication if that
So I know in the past, like 1 or 2 people are like, yeah, it's not really worth my time to do that. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Make sure it's
Yeah.
documented.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the key there, like, I think your main cutoff, if someone comes back a year later, you could say, we've already submitted the financial report for this project, we cannot, so that would be like an actual, we actually can't add more funds to that year.
So just make sure it's documented.
And some
So-
projects, I guess theoretically, depending on when people travel, you could bump up against grant deadlines. Where you have to get something submitted before the end of the project year.
Yeah, exactly.
It's helpful.
So we're at 45, so if anyone needs to leave, totally understandable, but we're gonna keep going until the top of the hour.
What if I need to leave?
Then we don't get the last 3 slides.
Taking my
We're gonna
computer.
learn tips and tricks.
Okay, so yeah, during travel is gonna be the same for non-employees, make sure they're saving those receipts, anything except for food. And then for after travel, the PRA is going to submit the non-employee reimbursement form, and you all can decide how you do that, if the non-employee fills it out or if you do, but that gets submitted to Lisa. And one thing that Lisa wanted to make sure that you are aware of is oftentimes that mailing address is incorrect, so double check it, have the non-employee double check it, because that's where their check gets sent to. So just make sure that that address on that form is right. And then quickly I'll go into the reconciling P card. It's definitely more straightforward than Concur, than travel, but we wanted to make sure we reviewed this. So as always, before you make a P card purchase, make sure the item is not available in Marketplace. So Marketplace is always the preferred method of purchase. P card is the second option. And then going into taxes a little bit more, as we've said, there should be no taxes on Colorado purchases, and that means physical items that you buy in Colorado or items that you buy online that get delivered to Colorado. It does not mean a non-physical item that you buy while you're sitting at your desk in Colorado. So like a training or something, that does not need to have the taxes removed. Yeah.
I mean, like, if you can get them to remove the taxes though, like, it's no big deal, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's
that sounds
good.
great.
Okay.
Love it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, like I said to Amanda, just like if the vendor, you want to ask ahead of time if they can remove taxes. If they can't, choose a different vendor. So that's the case with Sam's Club and Costco. That's why we don't use them, is because they do not remove taxes. So simple as that. There's really no other argument there.
Because there's just like so many online subscription things that we have, like they will remove the taxes if you have to send them. I usually send them the links to those things. So
Which I forgot I hadn't linked here, so.
Just like the last time for the first invoice for the MailChimp, that they charged tax for that one.
it was a city
and
tax.
The city tax.
It's
Oh
like
my
18
God.
cents, but we got it removed,
Great
guys.
job.
Get it out of it.
And then it's the same as your travel. You want to make sure that you're putting the date of the purchase or the range of the purchases, your last name, first initial, and then what the expense category is. Make sure you're putting the business purpose in the header, same as travel, and that you're writing a business purpose for each individual item. And then if you're allocating between different speed types, make sure that you're explaining what that allocation is and what your reasoning is. Very rarely should an allocation be 50-50. So if it is, explain why, but either way, just make sure you're sharing that allocation. We recommend that you please submit your P-card reports every 30 days. I know that in the past, CAIANH has had deadlines that are very, every 30 days you have to submit them. You don't want to have any expenses that are sitting for longer than 30 days. So we recommend having a calendar a calendar event that reminds you each month to do that. But we're not sending out those deadlines as of now. And then a few specific expense item, like account codes. So for official functions, you can use your P card as long as you're not in travel status. And if it's under 5,000 and the supplier lets you pay with a credit card, something to be careful if you use your P card or just generally with official function purchases is to make sure that they haven't automatically added tip and gratuity on there. Because if you really can only get reimbursed up to 20%, so if you accidentally tip more beyond what they've automatically added, you would owe the university that money. And then for sponsored projects, if you have like office supplies that are specifically related to a project, like notebooks for attendees of a conference you're hosting, just make sure that you're putting that under field research supplies and not office supplies, because that is office supplies are a sensitive expense and aren't allowable as direct costs. And then if you are purchasing any other sensitive expenses, the list is on FormStack. You want to make sure that you get that approval ahead of time for most cases, unless it's a center grant. So and then attach that approval to your Concur report when you're reconciling for the P card. Okay, you got -6 minutes for the activity.
Do you need to go, Erin?
I have a meeting at 11, so,
Okay.
but I suspect a lot of people do.
We're gonna whip through this. Okay, it's gonna be fast. Okay. All right, quick activity, test how well you were paying attention. Seemed like you guys were mostly alive during it, so that's good. Okay, there are two things that are incomplete or missing from this report header. Hopefully you can see. Does anyone know from what we talked about, it was mentioned in the P card and the travel reconciliation, there are two things that are not gonna pass our standards here.
There's no comment.
Nice, yep. Nothing explaining like the purpose of the travel or the event, yeah.
The report name just says travel. Nice.
Yep.
Does it have a
Nailed
date
it.
or a name?
Exactly, yeah. So generic report name and then no business purpose or travel description. So those are two things that we want to see every single time. So let's just quickly, we can craft like a great business purpose together. So it does not need to be 10 sentences, but just as succinctly as you can say, what was the trip, what was the business purpose, and then what were the dates of travel. So in the interest of time, I'll just kind of go through to the next thing and pretend like we did this together. So here's an example. I traveled to X place to complete X task on X date. So travel to Pine Ridge Reservation for tracks data collection as required for grant deliverables from 2/9 to 2/12. Doesn't need to be any longer than that, but just something to explain, like, why were you traveling in the first place? Yeah.
From the procurement training last time, that sometimes that they recommend to spell out the previous like track so they can know what it is. So do we need really that we need to spell out instead of just English so that everyone can, when they review it, they know what it is.
Yeah.
But isn't there a character limit?
I think it's like 500 or something. So yeah, you should be able to spell tracks out in this example. So yeah, that would be great.
But you probably wouldn't send it back.
I'm not gonna send it back if something's like not, or if something is abbreviated that it shouldn't be, but if you think about it and you, remember to do the full name, that is definitely helpful. Okay, so last quick thing here, and then we'll get into the tips and tricks. So in this scenario, non-employee travel, the non-employee, they live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but they're traveling here for a 2-day meeting. Is that in-state or out-of-state travel?
It's in-state. Oh, it's in-state, since you're traveling.
In-state, they're coming to Colorado.
Oh.
Yes, it doesn't matter where they live, it's where the event takes place.
Oh.
Yes. They're adding 2 personal days to the end of their trip. What documentation is needed to get this approved, and then how would they pay for the flight cost?
We need to do the flight comparison.
Yep.
A cash receipt.
Yep, or
Potentially.
deduction from the reimbursement. So depending on what that total cost was, those are the 2 options, but that flight comparison would be required. They took a Lyft to dinner with friends one night. That was not part of the event. Is this a reimbursable expense?
No way, Jose.
All right, not reimbursable. Okay, last thing, there was not, we didn't exactly talk about this, but this specific scenario, but let's say there wasn't a formal agenda created for the event, but they did claim per diem meals. How might you as the PRA demonstrate which meals are eligible for per diem when thinking about agendas?
I would just type it out onto a Word document and upload it.
So you could just create an after the fact, like really simple streamlined agenda. I had to do this for an event I went to in December. It was like a weekend long event and they didn't have like a set schedule. So I just kind of made one that explained no meals were provided. This is where it was. This is kind of the times that we were expected to be at the event, things like that. Okay, Erin, round us out. Here we go.
30 seconds or less.
Okay, couple Concur tips and tricks. So you may or may not know this. Anybody who uses Concur a lot know this. You can search, use the flight number search to match online itineraries that you've already searched. Anybody ever use that? It's just a little shortcut for you. You can make sure your travel profile is accurate, add your loyalty numbers, your TSA pre-check, all that information. That goes for flights, hotel preferences, and rental car agencies. Guess what? There's a Concur mobile app, just what your cell phone needs. Add another app, but like we were saying, it's easier to keep track of stuff while you're traveling because you can add receipts and per diem and all of that in there while you're traveling. Anybody have that? No, okay. Maybe you'll test it out for your next trip. Make sure that your expense report tells a story. You've heard us say this repeatedly. We want anybody, anywhere at the university. It's not for us. We know what you're doing. We want anybody auditing it in the future, in the reasonable near future, to be able to look into it and know why you traveled and how it was paid for. So make sure that and that's the same standard you all use for research documentation. So it's fairly straightforward. Reconcile all of your employee trip expenses together. So don't send us a different report for airfare and then transportation. Just compile it all into one and send one report to McKenna to review. Just so you know, this is a pet peeve of hers. So just try to do all of those together so it's all in one report. Non-employees, it's okay if you have separate expenses for flights. There's a lot of resources on PSC. They have really been intentional about describing best practices and trying to tighten up their process. So there's a lot of training and articles available on their website. Okay, this is Concur is going to look different starting in March. They redesigned it to make it look a little bit more modern. Maybe it's going to be more useful. One way it will be more useful is having a clearer cost comparison, because sometimes that interface is really cumbersome. But also really cool, thanks for adding that here, McKenna, the environmental impact, so that it will actually snow again, like we talked about at the beginning. We need to be careful of our environmental impact, so it'll help us identify that. And theoretically will be more intuitive for adding per diem, which right now is not at all intuitive and usually has to be explained to someone. So hopefully that makes it easier to do. To get into your archived and current reports, you go through the expense option on the left navigation bar, and then you go to manage expenses, and they'll all be listed there. And there's a short preview video that'll be linked, so these slides will be available to you on the internet.
Get ready.
Okay, resources. Here's a lot of information. Form stack, just as a reminder, is going to be, this is our CAIANH form stack for all approvals, is going to be moved to Smartsheet starting in July. We'll have more trainings on that coming up, but just another reminder, right now, still use form stack for your travel approvals and to upload your non-employee reimbursements. PSC travel site, we already said, has a ton of information. What supporting documents are needed is linked to an internal document, isn't that right? That you can use to guide your expense usage. Travel and events intranet page has a lot of information. I think the travel SOP that's mentioned below is also linked there. And within the travel SOP, there's a couple other links. Okay, thanks for bearing with us. That was a lot of information and really good questions that came up. So thanks for sticking it out. Wednesday, March 11th, subcontract setup and monitoring is our next coffee and conversation. Any last questions before we?
Can I add a tip to travel?
Yeah.
This. So I don't know that if any of us in here use the TripIt app. So yeah, that is the very well organized and the plan. That is the paid pro app, but it's paid by university. You can sign up with your university to get that TripIt, so you can plan for your trip.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Ed. Okey-doke.
Great.
Well,
Good to
thanks
see you.
everyone.
It's like it's always
See y'all.
like kicking me out and then it's like
It hates you. Trip bit.